Hi, welcome everyone, and good morning. Today, we're going to be discussing a blueprint for managing the blue economy and industry perspective. This is the first of two panel discussions where we'll be exploring how Asia's private sector can develop and execute on a roadmap to sustainable blue growth. Later on in the afternoon, Dominic Ziegler will be leading another panel that has the same theme of managing a blueprint for blue growth, but from the government perspective. For this one, we want to focus quite squarely on the industry perspective and what businesses in the private sector can do. As we know, many of Asia's economies are heavily dependent on the ocean. The region's development path must promote economic development while protecting the ocean's ecosystem that many people and many industries rely on. I'm very delighted that my panel joining me today represents the spectrum of businesses that lead the region's growth in Asia. Online, actually, we have Prabowo Achara, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer of JSW Group. Welcome. We have Rajiv Menon. He is the President for APAC at Marriott. Toshikazu Shomi. He is the Vice President for Ocean Network Express. And finally, Darian McBain. She is the advisor for the Monetary Authority of Singapore. Welcome, everyone. Before we begin, I thought we'll have a quick poll. You have those paddles on your card. Yesterday during the conference, we talked a lot about the nexus between oceans and the climate agenda. And this morning we heard the same from the president of Palau, where he said not enough is understood about this nexus. And I just wanted a show of yes and no's here, whether you thought that needs a lot more needs to be done to get business leaders as well as corporates to understand the nexus between the climate and the oceans. Say yes if you think that business leaders know enough already, and say no if you think that a lot more education needs to happen. I think we have almost a 90%, 95% room here that's saying no. So I think that's an easy step to embark on, and we'll battle this in the panel today. I thought I'll start with Prabal online first. JSW has a diverse business, including the manufacture of steel, of energy, mining, cement, and development of critical transport infrastructure. So your business spans a whole range of services and products for the economy. Can you share with us how your business is dependent on the marine ecosystem and what you're doing to support that development of a blue economy?
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody who is hearing. Um, as you have already stated that JSW is heavily into manufacturing, and we are operating mostly out of India. If you look at broad perspective in India, we have almost 4% of GDP is being contributed by the blue economy, and we have a very large coastline of more than 7,500 kilometers, and that is a lot of people are dependent on this. So when it comes to business like manufacturing units like us, we need to look at in two perspectives that how business are getting impacted because of the oceans and the blue economy, and how we are impacting, and then what are the risk and opportunity we can manage. As you stated that we being a very manufacturing oriented businesses, the lot of logistics operations, we depend on sea. And just to give example, in the last year, we managed almost 62 million ton of cargo handling through the sea routes. And that is becoming a very efficient way of managing our logistics, because when we manufacture steel, cement, all product and raw material need to be moved uh, into and out from the operation sites. So that is becoming an important business imperative to depend on the sea routes for the transport and logistics operations. The other aspect, which I think you stated, telling that how climate change is impacting the business and the ocean systems, and that is becoming a challenge. See, you know, I stated that India is having a long coastal route, and most of our operations and many of our operations are located in the coastal zones. So therefore, we need to ascertain what kind of climate change risks are going to impact because of the sea rise to our operations that we are getting ready, and then how we can protect those assets to continue for the long term. besides, to protect those coastal regions and our assets from the flurries of seas, and because of the sea rise and because of the climate change, a lot of coastal abatement or climate change abatement structure need to be made, and that requires, of course, steel and cement, and that is where possibly we will be contributing. So, in a sense, as a business, we are dependent on the blue economy, and in the sense we also get we have also impact on those indirectly, and that we need to be careful about. Thank
Thank-
you.
Thanks very much. I'll come back to you on asking on what you're doing to support that growth and development of the blue economy. If I could
Sure.
turn to you, Rajiv. This morning as well, with President Palo, President Palo, he said that the country, the island, is really facing a crisis because tourism was really battered during COVID time, and he used this really shocking phrase. He said, "You might as well bomb us." And I just wanted to get your perspective from the hospitality industry, why you think that ocean health and marine conservation is so important for the survival of your industry.
Well, it's hugely important, really, for three big reasons. One, the economic benefits that our industry gets from the oceans. I mean, people spend billions of dollars traveling to resorts all over the world that are by the seaside. Two, as a food source, right? We are procuring billions of dollars worth of seafood every day to serve to our guests. And then finally, it's really around recreational reasons, be it on cruising or, you know, doing other recreational activities. Oceans are critically important. I mean, if oceans are not healthy, we simply give up on travel and tourism.
Yeah, one of the brilliant advances of the last 50 years was the ability for mass travel to happen, and that's also linked to the rise of low-cost airlines, for example, that allowed many tourists, as well as business travelers, do short trips to areas, and that has possibly also supported some of your business's growth because more people come to your hotels. I just want to find out how you think about the tension between mass travel, which has brought lots of benefits for the full economy, versus sort of the fact that this has put a lot of pressure on the ecosystems, especially the marine ecosystems.
So it's interesting that if you look pre-COVID, we were experiencing mass travel slash tourism in many countries by the ocean side, or for that matter, in some cities, and we were seeing the detrimental impact of it, right? But then COVID came along, and our business, the business of travel and tourism, was severely impacted to the point that, you know, most cases, 90% of the revenues declined overnight. And for the last 2 years, close to 150 million jobs were displaced in the world of travel and tourism. So we've seen the extreme of both sides. And I think it really is our responsibility as individuals, as organizations, as governments, to keep that fine balance of keeping tourism healthy, but at the same time making sure we keep the balance on the sustainability side. And I think one of the things I continue to say coming out of COVID, the real silver lining has been that COVID has reaffirmed the power of travel. As people have spent time reflecting, locked up in their houses or rooms, on what was very important to them, it was very clear that the ability to spend time with family and friends, ability to be able to travel was critically important to them. But at the same time, what they've also, coming out of COVID, become very clear about is the aspect of responsible travel or sustainability as an important part of travel. They want to make sure they give back to the communities they go to. They want to make sure they keep the carbon footprint to the minimum. And they want to travel with brands that are very focused on sustainability. So I think these are some good things that have come out of it. But on the negative side, we've also seen the number of initiatives that the industry had going on pre-COVID got severely impacted. And, you know, simple thing as single-use plastic. As a company, we were back in 2016. Our CEO had basically said, as part of our sustainability initiatives, we were focused on eliminating single-use plastic. We were focused on reducing food waste by 50%, for example. But what I saw during COVID was most governments pretty much pushed back, and we had to bring single-use plastic back, just from a health and safety point of view. So we're starting that journey all over again. So there's good and bad, but I think overall, there's a real positive, because coming out of COVID, almost all individuals are today, more aware and more focused on sustainability than they were ever before pre-COVID.
Thank you very much, Raj.
Thank you.
If I could move to you, Shomi-san, and ask how are you thinking about the blue economy from a shipping perspective?
Okay, not only shipping, I'd like to ask our audience that what is the goal of the blue economy, or how to say, blue, this agenda. I believe the fight against global warming, this is a very big agenda, but it's still part of this, our ultimate goal. I believe our ultimate goal is to secure our sustainable growth in the future, next centuries. Even our company set a environmental goal in 2050, but 2050 is not the end of the world. So we set this goal as a kind of the, how can I say, midpoint of our company's strategy. So throughout this process, we find out what is a true objective, and we check if we know the true objective and where we are. And we believe that we should collaborate with other stakeholders, clients, suppliers, and service providers everywhere, and the shareholders as well. So therefore, maybe you can visit our homepage, what our green target and green vision is. We believe no one can achieve these goals by ourselves. We need to collaborate with others. We should forget about to compete with our competitor, because we share the same threat. And we need to take action right now. And we need to team up, and we should focus on what we can do. So therefore, we believe at this moment, we are focusing on to reducing our carbon footprint in a scope 1. Scope 1, as you know, this is a direct emission. And scope 3 is someone's scope 1. So therefore, if everyone here is focusing on to reduce scope 1 as much as possible, that will help us to reduce scope 3. So therefore, our midterm goal is to reduce GHG scope 1 as much as possible. Then help others to reduce their scope 3 is our scope 3. That's an overall strategy we have. And I assume our shipping industry is aligning in the same direction.
Thanks very much. I think you raised a very important point, which is the tension between competition and collaboration among corporates. If you look at consumer brands or banks and any sector of the economy, many of them are competing against their competitors on who is the more green brand to try to gain market share on that. And that is something that they are, of course, entitled to do, but it shouldn't distract them from the need to collaborate across the industry to pioneer new solutions across that value chain. If I could turn to you, Darian, to ask, how do you think the finance industry needs to get focused on the blue economy just as it has on the green economy?
So thank you, and it's great to be here today. I think it was a surprise for me when I moved from the seafood industry to the financial sector that there really was no literacy about the oceans. I moved from Thai Union, one of the largest seafood processors in the world, where all of our conversations about the oceans, and of course for a seafood company, the health of the ocean is absolutely paramount to the business that you're running. And having a strong focus on SDG 14, life below water, to the Central Bank of Singapore, where everything is about green. So Singapore has a green plan. We were looking at green finance. all the conversations were about green, and there seemed to be no recognition of the role of the oceans. I mean, it covers, as you would know, over 70% of the planet's surface. It regulates the temperature, and yet not a single conversation in the green finance area was about the role of the oceans. And SDG 14 continues to be the least invested of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think from having worked on both sides in the seafood sector and then in finance, I actually think it's oceans literacy that we're lacking, that the financial sector doesn't really understand what's happening in the oceans. Certainly the science seems complex, and whether you're looking at blue carbon and mangroves, which is starting to be a lot more of a conversation, particularly for nature-based solutions, or the role that the ocean economy can play, there just isn't the language to help people really dive in deep. And so from a financial perspective, if you are looking for what the opportunities are, or indeed how you assess the risks, that's where you come up to challenges. And if I look at aquaculture as a part of the seafood industry, most of that is actually rated as quite high risk. It's uninsurable because of the location of where many of these aquaculture facilities are. It's not that these shouldn't continue, and we'll be speaking later today about innovation in aquaculture. We need aquaculture to feed the world, but how do we get over this misunderstanding of the oceans, and how can we make sure that finance is flowing to the blue economy?
How do you think we can do that? Is that by the regulators getting more involved, or their consumers pressuring them?
So I think there's a number of ways. Oceans people are passionate about. I don't think it's a matter of consumers need to raise this, but I do think there needs to be more work on the literacy and the role of the oceans and the ocean economy in a transition towards net zero. And picking up slightly on the previous points, I do think it can't just be about this carbon tunnel vision. We need to make sure that the nature discussion is there. We need to make sure that people are at the heart of that. Along with an energy transition is going to come a food system transition. That is immediately there. I mean, going to culture and social, transport, travel, how goods are shipped. This whole blue economy conversation needs to come up much more. And so I don't think it's any one part of society that needs to do it, but there is governments and regulation. There is the role that businesses play, and then there's what consumers will want as well.
Thank you very much. If I could pick up on Darren's point around innovations in aquaculture and move to Pradoda to ask, what are the innovations that you're seeing in the steel and manufacturing industry that are pioneering a pathway for the blue economy?
I think.
Yeah, let me pick from Rajiv's point, which is stated about the plastics, although it is not really directly related to the steel or cement manufacturing, but how we are supporting that. We all understand that the plastic in ocean is becoming a nuisance, and by 2050, I think we'll get more plastics than fish. So as a group, what we did, we banned all the plastics uses by in 2019, and we are no more using plastic, so that is not finding a way to the ocean. Second thing, that we are collecting plastic and try to use in our cement and steel operations so that we can use and prevent that going to the ocean. So that is one way that how we can possibly supporting the ocean economy. The second part, the protections of our assets and improving the biodiversity of the mangrove. I think we talked about the blue carbon as well. And that is where we are hugely working on the mangrove restorations across the coastline where we are working. And that is not only improving the quality of biodiversity in the ocean, but it is supporting the livelihood of the people around, and it is increasing the productivity of the land. It is increasing the supply of fish, and that is where we are working very closely with the appropriate government authorities and doing that to improve the blue carbon available and improve the sea restorations. The third thing, what we are looking at, climate change also, we talked about having a risk for the assets because of the ocean increase. We also find that as an opportunity. For example, it will open up new ports for logistics operations, and that is where we are trying to, one of our business which is into the shipping and transport and logistics. We are operating 2 private ports and 5 terminals, and we are looking for opening new ports that will help us in navigations and moving our goods we use for the manufacturing processes.
Thank you.
One more thing, I am running sort of the battery life. I might get sort of any time.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem, no problem. Thanks very much for that. I'd like to take this opportunity then to turn to the floor and to ask if you have any questions for our panel already. Please raise your hand. I think we have one, this lady in the middle over here, please. If a microphone could come to her. Please, maybe just continue raising your hand. Thank you. If you could share your name and the organization that you represent.
Hi, thank you. My name is Kelly, and I'm working for the Sea Aquarium right here. Yeah, so my question is building on the point by Darian. So we talk about carbon tunnel vision, and I think it's quite relevant right now in the industry as well as corporations. How do we try to incorporate building biodiversity and nature instead of just planting mangroves and seagrasses just for the sake of their carbon sequestration, but also understanding that they also build biodiversity and restore nature. So I think this is a very important point that we would like the industries and the corporations to answer as well. Thank you.
Darren, you want to press right off?
So, coming from the corporate background, I was always working, well, not always, since 2015 under the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So you have 17 goals, you've got all of those colors. I'm not wearing my badge today, but I have very much tried to push in Singapore that it isn't just about green. There's 17 colors, and it's actually the interrelationship between all of those. So you're absolutely right. I do worry about carbon tunnel vision and unintended consequences of focusing only on carbon reduction without thinking about how society is actually going to transform to a low carbon society. I think we're starting to see more thought and a more thoughtful approach on biodiversity and nature. From the financial sector, that's coming from the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. And I'm not saying that's the panacea or the answer, but it is at least starting to make the financial institutions thinking about what data do they need, what is their impact on the broader environment and nature, and nature's impact on them. So taking a much stronger double materiality perspective. I think the potential for then involving the people, the S side, it really comes to the fore when you look at nature-based solutions, because if you can't just have some mangroves and say we're planted and we're done, you then need to make sure that they remain for many, many years and that they're cared for, they're integrated into the economy. And I do think that payment for services to nature and to make it actually a career option that you could be reforesting or looking after mangroves then becomes a whole new area. So I think if we only focus on one thing, which is carbon reduction, we will actually miss our ultimate goal as a society.
Thanks very much. Anyone else wants to comment?
Yes, as a ONE, we also engage in some of the programs to protect biodiversity, etc. And in the past, in the shipping companies has a problem about ballast water treatment. In the past, we take ballast water in somewhere near Singapore and omit in the European water. Then the biodiversity may be disturbed a lot. Now it is not allowed to do so. So this is a gradual, how can I say, lesson for every industry, not only shipping, but we adapt that. And on top of that, as Darian mentioned, as a good corporate citizen, we need to contribute to the society as well. It's not a kind of a very straightforward our environmental goal, because it is very difficult to measure. But however, we have a strong will to contribute to the society, not only in Singapore, where we have a global headquarters, but also as many countries where we have the connection. That's clearly one of the part of our strategy.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I would say is, at the end of the day, it has to be a holistic approach. Decarbonization, to me, is just one of the measurement tools, right? And the reality in life and business is what's measurable is achievable. So if we just focus on this as a measurement tool, but have holistic plans against it, I think we'll all be better served in the long term.
Thanks very much. I mean, I think what strikes me is that a lot of companies have been picking the SGDs as they see fit, right? And that has also been advised to them quite often that they need to pick what's material to them, focus on those goals, and go for it. Drum up a plan and measure and report. But it does mean that sometimes you might lose the holistic picture if you focus squarely on, say, 3 out of the 17 goals, and they contradict the others of what you're doing. If I could come to the floor again, and there's a question over there at the back.
Good morning, the panel and delegates here. My name is Ron Tan. I'm from My Heart Group Engineering. Basically, I heard one of the speakers talking about agriculture. Basically, today, the agriculture industry uses a lot of toxic chemical fertilizer called NPK. NPK represents ammonium nitrate, phosphate, and potassium. All these 3 components are major pollutants to the global ocean. Why? Because when you apply this fertilizer onto the soil, most of them, 90% are wasted. In some cases, 60% are wasted because it's highly soluble. And when you water it, most of them goes into the river system, and from the river goes into the ocean, and resulting in what they call algae bloom. And this algae bloom takes away the oxygen, and most of the places like major lakes, major river, they're all heavily polluted with algae bloom and destroying the fisheries and all that. So with this opportunity at a high cost of gas, because most of the NPK is made from gas, so we should take this opportunity to stop using this toxic fertilizer for agriculture and use regenerative agriculture, which is less carbon intensive, and also it helps to absorb more carbon without this NPK.
Thank you very much. I think we can all agree with that. You're preaching to the converted. If you had a question from the floor, over here, please.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Sue Toomey from Hands On Hong Kong. My question is for the panel, anyone who could answer. Maybe, Rajiv, we could start with you. As business leaders, you always have to balance being a responsible corporate citizen, but also with bottom line. How much airtime does this get in the boardroom?
So I'd say coming out of COVID, it is getting considerable amount of airtime. Because today, as an organization, we believe being the largest in the world, it's our responsibility. But at the same time, our customers are demanding it. And more importantly, our associates are demanding it. And I think that's exactly what I said earlier, that there was a silver lining to COVID from my perspective. And that silver lining was that almost every individual came out of the pandemic thinking, how can I contribute to being more sustainable, and how can I hold others more accountable on sustainability? So I think, just when I look back to what I mentioned earlier, our CEO in 2016 laying out 10-year plan, today, as it stands, our next 10-year plan is that we are working with third-party consultancy firms to really not only set up very clear goals, but goals are now being driven down to specific hotels. Reporting is being driven down to specific hotels. And then we are taking this holistic approach on not just about carbon, but how can we help communities around our hotels get better. And simple example, last year we launched what we call as Good Travel with Marriott Bonvoy. And that's just regenerative tourism, just telling our customers as they travel to our resorts, they have the opportunity to give back. Example would be a hotel in Maldives. We've got 7 of them. One of our resorts, you can go in, you can work with a government-approved NGO to replant coral. Similarly, there's hundreds of other examples that our hotels are deploying, just so that we can create a better community, a better place for all of us. And I think the way I see it, you will continue to see a much stronger focus on sustainability as we move forward, at least from our industry point of view. Thank you.
Fellow panelists, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I share the same view. So yeah, I have a 19-year-old daughter, and my daughter always asks me, "Hey, Daddy, you are the head of sustainability. What you are doing for your generation and for our generation as well?" So yeah, I echo Rajib-san's comment. Nowadays, a lot of industry and company are seriously taking this issue as their own agenda.
I think yesterday on the keynote panel, the foreign minister or the previous foreign minister, Vivian Balakrishnan, mentioned that the greatest pressure that will have to come will be from the people who are voting into the governments into place. And I think the same applies to corporates. We are seeing a lot of our companies being quite pressured by their employees that are working for them, and that is motivating them to put this high onto the board agenda. You would see that companies where the generation is younger, they're very passionate and they're values driven. Board directors and as well as agents or CEOs tend to take more attention. I think we have a question over here.
To the previous point, how many of these corporate activities are add-on activities or add-on offerings? For example, if we take the Good Travel program, versus replacing what the current portfolio looks like. To my feeling, a lot of the great initiatives, I'm not questioning the initiatives themselves, are to generate more business, not necessarily replace the business that's already there.
I wonder if, Darian, you'd like to take that?
So perhaps combining the two previous questions, when I joined Thai Union, it was very unusual for an Asian-based company, although it was a global company, to employ a chief sustainability officer reporting to the CEO. That was just not the done thing. It might have been happening in Europe and US, but not here. But it was recognition that at that time, there was market share that could come from sustainability. But I actually think the company has really changed now. Sustainability, as you've heard from all the panelists, isn't just a nice to have and an opportunity. It's now how you stay in business, because whether it's through your employees or through your supply chains or through regulation, you need to be doing this work. And so I do think the nature of how business is operated is starting to change. And there are differentiations between different countries and particularly from the different regulatory regimes. But it is starting to become perhaps less window dressing and a nice to have and corporate social responsibility, and more about business continuity. And if I'm advising businesses, it is always about not only look at the risks, but also thinking about how are you going to continue your business in a world of, is it limited resources to do with energy? Is it to do with human resources? For seafood, it's if there are no fish in the sea, how would you have your business? And so diversify and manage your business that way. So I do think it is changing the fundamental way that many businesses are starting to operate, but we're at the start of that journey.
I wonder whether it's a good one to poll to the audience as well, to ask you for your opinion. Do you think that for the businesses that you interact with or that the companies that you buy from are looking at a sustainability agenda more as an add-on rather than as fundamental change to your business? So yes, it's an add-on. No, I think that there is fundamental change happening. So I would say more yeses. So yes, it's an add-on. I think we then have more work to do to make sure that we can convince them otherwise. Any other questions from the floor? There's one here at the back.
Yes, hello. Sebastian Dufour, working for Schneider Electric in Sustainability and Strategy Corporate. Just a question to build upon the previous one about the regulation and the regulatory framework that are provided to companies to show their transition or to enforce the transition. You mentioned the TNFD and how it can be a real, framework of change in order to bring the double materiality and take into consideration not only our dependencies but really our impact. How the ocean and the blue footprint is taken into account into the TNFD? And second question, really on the regulation in general, how do you foresee the evolution of those regulations around the ocean globally, not only with TNFD, but really as a regulation?
Thanks very much. So I think the panel will respond from an industry perspective rather than from a government regulatory perspective, which we'll cover in the panel in the afternoon. But does my colleagues want to respond?
Yeah, just on the government regulation piece, Toshi-san and I were chatting earlier, and I think he used an excellent example of the competition between the shipping lines and how a government regulation has actually helped push everybody up. You may want to
Okay, all right.
get into the details.
All right. Yes, clearly regulation is needed because one good example for shipping, if we'd like to reduce carbon footprint, firstly, we need to have alternative fuel. But at this moment, alternative fuel cost is 3 or 4 times more than the fossil oil. And the cost is huge. Each consumer level, which is not so huge. Yesterday, I shared that story. Some of you may remember that. Now you are buying $100 shoes from Southeast Asia to Northern Europe. To cover all the costs, how much you guess? Only 20, 30 cents. So as an individual consumer, you can pay, right? But say, from the manufacturer's point of view, it is huge. So therefore, if someone is allowed not to use alternative fuel, and someone is okay, that may distort the market. So I believe universal and simple regulation is needed for sure to avoid, how can I say, distorting the market, which everyone does not fear the competition. But we want to secure we are under the fair competition. As long as we are under the fair competition, how can I say, evolution may happen. But point is, say, if I have the full authority to do so, you can ask if I do right now. My answer is no, because renewable fuel is not ready for the scalable use. We need to take a more gradual approach. So therefore, I'm not sure if you know much about that, but shipping industry has several approaches. From next year, we have new regulation, 2 new regulations. One is CII, Carbon Intensity Index. The other one is EEXI. So these 2 regulations is a kind of gradual approach to reduce our carbon footprint gradually in a realistic way. So my point is, again, we need to have very clear and simple, not a local rules. And secondly, but at the same time, we should not be in the too hurry, because if we start right now with full scale, no one can achieve that goal. That's my point.
Maybe if I could just add on, because you asked about TNFD. So financial regulation is important, and a lot of that is relating to the data, TNFD, TCFD, ISSB, a lot of acronyms. But you still need environmental regulation, and particularly where it comes to the oceans, countries need to be able to regulate how their oceans are managed and operated. Obviously, you have international treaties for management of international waters. Financial regulation won't necessarily negate the need to have proper environmental regulation, whether it's of the land or of the ocean.
Thanks very much. There's one more question from the floor, or there are 2. I think someone raised their hand at the back first. So, yeah, you have the
I would
mic.
like to follow the question regarding the airtime in the boardroom. So what percentage of your annual budget is allocated towards sustainability? And what's the trajectory of it towards 2030?
So if I can say that, first and foremost, the company, at least from Marriott perspective, is committed to net zero by 2050 or before. We are setting ourselves a 2030 target. As I mentioned earlier, we've brought in third parties to help us not only set these goals, but also measure success and measure implementation by unit. And where I'm going with it is in terms of the budget, we are starting to see an increased budget deployed towards sustainability, and I expect that this will only continue to grow in years to come.
Anyone else want to comment?
I would say if sustainability is at your heart of your business, your whole budget is dedicated towards sustainability because that's the way you're doing business. You can see it's separate to business if there is a particular budget line for sustainability, and then there's the rest of business.
Thanks very much. So I think it's a good time to wrap up our panel. I learned a lot from my colleagues here today. Some of the key things that I took away is that ocean literacy is still something that we really have to work together on. We need to avoid carbon tunnel vision. What we were expecting from industry, as well as innovation and solutions, including nature-based solutions. We need more collaboration, less competition, and we need to see a holistic approach to the SDGs, and especially on number 14, to make sure that that is seen as a holistic picture. So thank you very much to the panel, and hope to see you guys next at the next session.